Thanks to our next speaker, there's literally no excuse not to vote. Rolling into 2020 like, whoa, let's bring Debra Cleaver, founder and CEO of Vote.org, to the stage.
I feel like I should warn you guys that I'm going to go wildly off topic, but that's what happens when you let me come on stage. So, hi, I'm Debra Cleaver. I'm the founder and CEO of Vote.org. And Vote.org uses technology to increase voter turnout. So, one thing about technology is it's not a solution in and of itself. It's actually an amplifier for known solutions. And over the years, it's become clear that there's two things we're actually trying to solve for. One is low voter turnout, and two is the utter lack of representation in the electorate itself. So I think as we go into 2020, the excuse is the thing that we want to solve for is there's no excuse for neglecting huge percentages of the population. And I'm going to give you a very specific example. I'm going the wrong way on my slides. Oh, boy. Okay, we're just going to wing it. So we're going to go back to the 2017 Alabama election. Does anyone remember the 2017 Alabama election, other than Denise? So the Alabama election was really interesting because it was in Alabama, a really low turnout state, and a state that's considered non-competitive by all experts, which is fascinating because 32% of all registered voters in Alabama are Black, and they're overwhelmingly progressive. So someone called me one day and said, "Do you think the Alabama election is competitive?" And I said, "It's absolutely competitive if the electorate matches the population." And he said, "My political guy says it will cost $20 million to make the electorate match the population." And I said, $20 million means TV, and we need to stop investing in TV. Broadcast television is an excellent way to reach white voters over 50. And that is why elections are so expensive in the United States, because the 2016 election cost $10 billion. 80% of it was spent on broadcast television, reaching across the aisle to get white people over 50 to vote for your preferred candidate. But you're statistically more likely to change your spouse than your political party. So reaching across the aisle is a terrible waste of money. So again, this guy was like, "Well, if someone were going to fund Vote.org to be in Alabama, what would you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is super simple. There's two candidates. They're going to spend about $50 million combined reaching across the aisle to white voters. We're going to spend our time and money reaching out to Black voters, 33% of all of Alabama." I really wish I could get my slides to work because they're great, but just picture it with me. So we're really prone to excess. If Vote.org goes in, we go all in. So the first thing that happened was we raised about $800,000 compared to the $50 million that the candidates had, and that was fine. And I called our billboard guy, because we have a billboard guy, and I said, "How much to buy every billboard in a Black county in Alabama?" And he was like, "Excuse me?" And I was like, "I want to buy every billboard in Alabama that's in a majority Black county." And he was like, "Okay." Oh, now they're advancing on their own. Perfect, we're all caught up. So first we bought 150 billboards in majority Black counties in Alabama. Absolutely amazing. And then guys, this thing doesn't do anything. It's a great slide. So then I was like, okay, we've got the billboards, can we get the buses now? So we put ads on the outside of every bus in Birmingham, and I was like, okay, that's pretty awesome. What about the bus shelters? So we got a bunch of bus shelters as well. We also pulled together some money for fancy billboards that count down to the day of the election. This was from a different state, but this is what we looked like. And I was like, okay, now we've got pretty much every billboard in Alabama. Could we go bigger? And the answer is we could go bigger. So then we started placing ads on Pandora, only targeting Black listeners. And those, again, excessive. They ran about 2 million times, targeting 200,000 people. And we're like, okay, it's a pretty good program. We're getting somewhere. Could we go any bigger? So then we bought the cell phone numbers of every registered Black voter in Alabama, and we hired humans to proactively text them and give them their polling place information. And I was like, is there anything else left that we can do? And the answer was yes. So we sent 200,000 pieces of mail reminding people that the election was coming just to households with registered Black voters. And when it was done, we had successfully interacted with 80% of the Black voters in Alabama, while Doug and what's-his-face just battled it out on broadcast TV. I legitimately could not remember his name because he was so horrifying. And so then it was election day, and we were like, okay, let's see what happens if instead of reaching across the aisle and setting money on fire, you actually just reached out to registered voters who are being ignored by partisan groups. And two things that were pretty shocking happened on that day. One, a Democrat won in Alabama, which is just literally shocking. And disclaimer, we're nonpartisan. What happens, happens. But I mean, objectively shocking. But the bigger thing that happened was for the first time ever in Alabama history, the electorate accurately reflected the population. What had been predicted was that white voter turnout would remain high because so many people reach out to white voters, and Black voter turnout would plummet. Instead, it was the opposite. White voter turnout plummeted because the candidates themselves are so distasteful, really, at the end of the day, and Black voter turnout doubled from predicted numbers, and there was 0% drop-off in Black voter turnout in Alabama between the 2016 presidential election and a December senatorial election in 2017. So, tying this back to 2020, there is no excuse for partisan neglect anymore in this country. There is no excuse for partisan groups from either side of the aisle to only reach out to white voters. There's no excuse for sending all the money on broadcast television. There's no excuse for saying that young people and people of color don't want to vote, because you hear that over and over. It is time for our candidates to actually reach out to the majority of the population and try to entice them not just to vote for the specific candidate, but to vote, because it is absolutely possible to radically increase voter turnout in America if you don't ignore the overwhelming majority of American voters. I'm Deborah Cleaver. I'm so sad you didn't get to see the rest of my slides. They're so good. Come find me. I'll show you the slides in the hallway. And thanks so much. As we go into 2020, do not tolerate this nonsense from candidates.